Hello, I'm Susan Sarandon. This is the first program in a set of 5 programs of Mythos in which Joseph Campbell explores the spiritual realm of the East, Hinduism and Buddhism. Joe's enthusiasm for Eastern religion is quickly obvious, but he's no missionary. He doesn't want to convert you. Rather, by exposing us to the way in which religious ideas are interpreted in the East, he hopes to enrich our own religious traditions. We sometimes gain insight by seeing ourselves as others see us. Seeing the religious symbols of Hinduism and Buddhism through Campbell's eyes can give us insights into our own spiritual lives. We don't have to become Buddhists to be enriched by Buddhism. We only need to open our eyes to a different way of looking at the world. Campbell begins with those universal themes of the human condition which unite us all.
Well, my project for this weekend is based on a couple of simple ideas, which I think I should present at the outset so that you'll know what I'm trying to do. The first is the idea that I've discussed here many times of the German anthropologist Adolf Bastian, who recognized that throughout the mythologies and religious systems of the world, the same images, the same themes were constantly recurring, appearing everywhere. And he called these elementary ideas, Elementargedanken. But he recognized also that wherever they occurred, they appeared in different costumes with different applications and different interpretations. And these provincial differences he called folk ideas or ethnic ideas, Völkergedanken. Now this is a very important distinction. It divides our whole subject into 2 quite different departments. Historians and ethnologists are interested in the differences, and one can study the mythologies and philosophies of the world with an accent on these differences. On the other hand, the problem emerges of the elementary ideas. Why are they everywhere? And this is a psychological problem, and it's a problem that separates us in our discussion of comparative forms from the whole research having to do with differences. Now, what I want to do today is, in giving the story of the Oriental systems, to insist on the elementary aspect. The second idea that I have in mind is as follows. Somewhere in the 9th and 8th centuries BC, a shift of accent takes place, particularly in the Orient, where instead of simply presenting the images are interpreted. That's to say, we're going to turn from simply what might be called visual and active relationship to the forms of myth, through the imagery of myth and the rituals through which the myth is rendered into life. There was a turn to thinking about these things, interpreting them. And so the Oriental philosophies actually represent a discourse interpreting the elementary ideas. Now, what happened in the West following the period of Aristotle, particularly, was a gradual attack on the mythological ideas, so that criticism in the West tended to separate itself from the elementary ideas. However, there is an undercurrent throughout the Western thinking also. It's associated with Gnosticism, alchemy, and many of the discredited manners of thought that carries on this interest in what might be called the perennial. Now, I'm thinking of the perennial philosophy as it has been expounded particularly by Anandake Coomaraswamy and picked up, I think it was during the 40s, by Aldous Huxley in that work of his, The Perennial Philosophy. I'm thinking of this as a translation into verbal discourse of the implications of the mythic images. And that's why there can be found in the mystical philosophies throughout the world the same ideas recurring. Let's say the continuities that we can recognize in myth come over into philosophy. And this is what is known as the perennial philosophy. Now, myth comes from the same zone as dream. And this is the zone of what I would call the wisdom body. When you go to sleep, it's the body that's talking. And what the body is moved by are energies that it does not control. These are the energies that control the body. They come in from the great biological ground, whatever it may be, protoplasm. They're there. They are energies and they are manners of consciousness. But we also have in this body this affair up here of the head, and it has a system of thinking of its own. And there's a whole manner of consciousness that stems from the head set, and it is different in its knowledge from that of the body. When a baby is born, it knows just what to do with its mother's body. It is ready for the environment into which it's put. It doesn't have to be instructed. These things happen. And this is the work of the wisdom body. Also, that same wisdom brought the little thing into form in its mother's body. It was shaped by these energies that live in us, and of which we are the carnal manifestation. This wisdom of the dream, wisdom of the vision, is the wisdom then of the perennial philosophy. When you dream, your waking consciousness aspect does not understand the dream. So you have to go to a psychoanalyst who doesn't understand it either. The interpretation is gradual, and it comes from an exploration by the head of your own wisdom. And so we find that there is a kind of radical distinction between the perennial philosophy in its mode and its axioms, quite different from the axioms and mode of the rational system. And it's out of that other that I want to try to talk today. Now, as I say, the interpretation of the mythic forms went forward in great style, principally in India, very early. And so it's through reviewing the mythologies and the interpretations of the myths in India and then in China and Japan that I propose to introduce us to what I take to be the ground thinking of the perennial philosophy. And so while I want to give a sense of the richness and wonder of the ethnic aspect of the Oriental system, my principal interest today is in extracting from them the elementary, not accenting the ethnic, but extracting the elementary. So that's what I'm going to try to bring forward. Here we are on the Ganges.